Keanu Reeves, pulling the hood of his sweatshirt slightly lower, quietly slipped into Arbor, one of Los Angeles's popular dining spots, a place few knew he actually owned. This wasn't a vanity project for him. He had dedicated years to perfecting the menu, finding the right chefs, and ensuring Arbor was a place where both everyday people and Hollywood's elite could comfortably enjoy a great meal. But Keanu knew that no business, especially in the service industry, ran smoothly just because the numbers looked good on paper. The real truth of a place wasn't hidden in profit margins, but in the whispers behind kitchen doors, in break room conversations, in the exhausted sighs of employees after a long shift. That's why, every few months, Keanu made it a habit to walk into Arbor as just a regular customer. No grand entrance, no prior announcement, just a man in a hoodie and jeans stepping into his own business like anyone else. That night, the place was buzzing. The Friday dinner rush was in full swing. Servers darted between tables, balancing trays laden with sizzling steaks and colorful cocktails. The air hummed with conversation and the clinking of glasses, filled with the aroma of garlic butter and grilled ribeye. Ambient lighting cast a warm, golden glow. At first glance, everything seemed perfect, but Keanu had been around long enough to know appearances could be deceiving. He spotted the manager, Manager Thorne, a tall, rigid-looking man in a crisp, dark shirt, standing at the edge of the dining floor, watching everything too closely, like a hawk circling its prey. There was something in his stance that felt off, not just observant, but controlling. As Keanu moved towards the bar area, intending to just observe for a while, he heard it, a soft, muffled sound coming from the side hallway near the kitchens. He almost missed it amidst the restaurant's buzz, but as he passed the hallway opening, the sound became clearer. Someone was crying, not loudly, not dramatically, but the choked-back sobs of someone desperately trying not to break down. Keanu slowed his steps. He glanced subtly towards the break room door, which was slightly ajar. Inside, he caught a glimpse of a young woman, head bowed, fingers gripping the edge of a metal counter, as if holding herself up. Another employee, a young man in an Arbor uniform, stood beside her, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Keanu didn't recognize the woman. He'd later learn her name was Clara. But the raw distress on her face hit him viscerally. Something was very, very wrong, and a familiar sense of quiet determination settled over him. He wouldn't leave until he understood what was happening. He turned back toward the bar and took a seat on a stool. His face remained calm, impassive, but his mind was racing. That crying, it wasn't just end-of-shift stress. It felt like fear. Keanu had done his share of tough jobs before making it big. He knew the pressures. But this felt different. His first instinct was to intervene directly. But right now, he wasn't Keanu Reeves, the owner. He was just another customer. So he listened. The young man beside Clara, Ben, according to his name tag, kept his voice low, but Keanu could pick out fragments. Can't let him. Doesn't own you. What choice do I have? Zrania, I'm gone. Keanu's hand tightened slightly around the glass of water the bartender had placed before him. His initial thought was a difficult customer, perhaps harassment. But the phrase, if I don't, I'm gone, didn't sound like it was about a customer. It sounded like a threat from within. Before he could process further, the bartender, Sam, approached. Hey, what can I get for you? Keanu turned, offering a polite, neutral smile. Just water for now, thanks. Sam nodded and moved down the bar. Keanu's gaze drifted back to the manager, Manager Thorne, still surveying the room with that unnerving intensity. Then he saw Ben emerge from the hallway, heading back onto the floor. The young man's jaw was tight, his hands fidgeting with the notepad in his apron. He looked shaken. Keanu saw his opening. He stood up casually, stretching slightly, and walked towards the server station near the back where Ben was trying to busy himself organizing plates. Hey, man, Keanu said quietly. Got a pen I could borrow? Ben looked up, startled. Yeah, sure. He fumbled for one on the counter and handed it over. Keanu took it, but lingered. Hey, Ben, he said, keeping his voice even. Couldn't help but notice earlier. Your friend seemed pretty upset. Ben stiffened immediately, his grip tightening on a stack of plates. She's fine, he said too quickly, avoiding Keanu's eyes. Keanu tilted his head slightly. Didn't look fine. Ben swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously towards Marcus Thorne across the room, then back down to the floor. Keanu recognized the fear. After a tense pause, Ben let out a shaky breath. She's not fine, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Keanu studied Ben's face. The kid wanted to talk, but was terrified. Keanu lowered his voice further. Is it a customer issue? Ben hesitated, that pause confirming Keanu's suspicion. No, Ben muttered. It's not. His eyes flicked again towards Thorne. He shook his head sharply. It's her personal business. It was a deflection born of fear. Keanu had seen this pattern before. Employees trapped, feeling powerless. Keanu leaned casually on the counter. How long has she worked here? Ben answered automatically. A little over a year. Then he tensed again. Why? Keanu shrugged nonchalantly. Just wondering if she likes the job. Ben let out a short, humorless laugh. She hates it, but she can't afford to leave. There it was. Trapped. Keanu felt a cold knot in his stomach. This was more than just a bad boss. Before Keanu could ask more, Ben stiffened again. Keanu felt the shift in the air. Marcus Thorne was approaching them. Everything okay over here? Thorne's voice was smooth but held an undercurrent of steel. Ben immediately looked down, focusing intently on the plates. Yes, sir. Just helping a customer find a pen. Keanu turned to face the manager. Up close, Thorne radiated an unpleasant mix of superficial charm and barely concealed arrogance. Can I help you with something? Thorne asked Keanu, his politeness thin. Keanu smiled easily. Nope, just got my pen. Ben here was very helpful. Thorne didn't smile back. He clapped Ben on the shoulder, a little too hard. Good, let's stay focused on our guest, shall we? Ben nodded quickly, eyes down. Yes, sir. Keanu felt his own jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. Not yet. He thanked Ben and walked away, feeling Thorne's eyes following him. His mind was made up. He stepped outside again, needing a moment. He leaned against the cool brick wall, pulling out his phone as a prop. He thought hard. Clara was terrified. Ben was scared, silent. Thorne radiated predatory control. This wasn't just bad management. It felt calculated, targeted. He needed confirmation from someone less directly under Thorne's thumb. As if on cue, Sam the bartender came out for a smoke break, leaning against the wall further down. Keanu saw his chance. He walked over casually. Long night, Keanu commented. Sam startled, then relaxed slightly, recognizing the customer from the bar. Yeah, Fridays. Keanu leaned beside him. Mind if I ask you something about your manager? Thorne? Sam's easygoing expression vanished instantly, replaced by caution. He glanced around. He's strict, Sam said noncommittally. Strict how? Keanu pressed gently. Sam hesitated, then lowered his voice significantly. Look, man, he's rough, especially on Clara. Makes her stay late, alone, after everyone else leaves. Says it's for extra duties, but the way he talks to her sometimes, watches her, it's creepy. We all see it. But she needs the job bad. Keanu felt a cold anger rise, but kept his voice steady. She ever mention anything specific? Any threats? Sam shook his head. Not in words I heard, but you see the fear, you know. She tenses up every time he calls her name, especially when he calls her into his office. That was enough. Abuse of power, intimidation, targeting the vulnerable. It was a pattern Keanu recognized and despised. Thanks for telling me, Sam, Keanu said, clapping his shoulder briefly. You did the right thing. Sam gave a worried half smile. Keanu turned back towards the restaurant. Clara was still inside under Thorne's watch. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had seen power abused before, in boardrooms, on film sets. He knew how quickly intimidation could escalate, how easily fear could silence people. He wouldn't let it happen here, not in his place. He pushed the doors open again. The main rush was over. The restaurant was quieter. Thorne was near the front, talking to the host. Keanu walked directly towards the back where Clara was clearing a table, her movements almost robotic. Clara, Keanu said, his voice calm but clear, stopping beside her table. She jumped slightly, looking up with wide, fearful eyes. Sir, I need to talk to you. Now. She hesitated, glancing towards Thorne. I'm working. It can wait, Keanu said firmly but gently. Come with me. He led her a few steps away towards a slightly more private alcove. Thorne had noticed and was already walking towards them, his face a mask of irritation. Is there a problem, sir? Thorne asked, directing the question to Keanu, but positioning himself slightly in front of Clara. Keanu ignored Thorne for a moment, looking directly at Clara. Clara, he said softly but urgently, you don't have to be afraid. I know what he's doing. You're not alone. Clara flinched, tears springing to her eyes. She shook her head, unable to speak. Thorne stepped closer. Sir, I must ask you to leave my employee alone. If you have a complaint... Keanu finally turned to face Thorne fully. His quiet demeanor shifted, replaced by an undeniable intensity. You're right, Thorne. We do need to talk, Keanu said, about your management style, about how you treat your staff, especially Clara. Thorne attempted a bluff. I have no idea what you're talking about. My management is perfectly professional. Keanu held his gaze. Is it professional to single out an employee, to make them stay late, alone, to create an environment where they're afraid to speak? Thorne's facade began to crack. Who do you think you are, coming in here and making accusations? Keanu didn't raise his voice. He simply stated, I'm the guy who signs your paycheck. He let the words hang in the air. He saw the flicker of confusion, then dawning horror in Thorne's eyes as the implication hit. Maybe he pulled out a discreet wallet ID. Maybe just his unwavering stare was enough. Clara gasped softly beside him. Ben and Sam, watching from afar, froze. My name is Keanu Reeves, he continued quietly. And this is my restaurant, your office. Now. The blood drained from Thorne's face. He looked utterly stunned, speechless. Sir, Mr. Reeves, I had no idea. Precisely, Keanu cut in sharply. You had no idea who you were talking to, and you didn't care enough to treat a person with basic respect regardless. That's the problem. Keanu turned briefly to Clara. It's okay now. You're safe, he reassured her gently, seeing the mix of shock and dawning relief on her face. He then fixed his gaze back on the stunned manager. My office, Thorne. Let's go. Thorne swallowed hard, his arrogance completely shattered, replaced by fear. He turned stiffly and led the way to the small manager's office at the back. Keanu followed, closing the door behind them. Inside, Thorne tried one last time. Mr. Reeves, please, let me explain. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Keanu cut him off, his voice low and cold. There's no misunderstanding, Thorne. I spoke with Ben. I spoke with Sam. I heard Clara myself. I saw the fear you cultivate. You target vulnerable employees. You abuse your authority. It stops now. Thorne started to protest again. But sir, my record. Your record just ran out, Keanu stated flatly. You preyed on someone who needed this job, made her feel trapped and powerless. That ends tonight. You're fired. Security will escort you out. Don't ever step foot in one of my establishments again. Thorne sank into his chair, defeated. Keanu walked back out to the main floor. The remaining staff, Clara, Ben, Sam, a few others, were gathered, waiting anxiously. Keanu addressed them directly. Marcus Thorne is no longer employed here, he announced calmly. He looked at Clara. You are safe. What happened to you was unacceptable, and it won't happen again. Clara let out a shaky breath, tears finally flowing freely, but this time they looked like tears of relief. Thank you, she whispered. Keanu gave a slight nod. But this isn't just about him, he continued, looking at the team. If this happened, it means there are things wrong with how we operate, how people feel, or don't feel. They can speak up. Ben stepped forward hesitantly, emboldened by events. He's right, Mr. Reeves. It wasn't just Thorne. There's a pressure, a fear of complaining. We need our jobs. Keanu listened intently. I understand, and that changes now. This restaurant, and likely others in the group, will undergo a full review. We need to build a culture where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard. Where reporting issues isn't a risk, it's a responsibility, and I need your honest input to make that happen. He looked directly at Clara again, then Ben, then Sam. Will you help me do that? For the first time that night, a genuine sense of hope seemed to enter the room. They nodded. An hour later, Keanu sat in his car outside, watching the staff lock up. Clara walked out with Ben and Sam, talking quietly, a tentative smile on her face. They looked lighter. Keanu let out a long breath. One restaurant, one manager. But it was a start. It was a harsh reminder that leadership wasn't about delegation and reports. It was about the people on the ground, the environment created, the responsibility held. He had almost missed it. Too often, people in power were insulated from the reality faced by those below. Tonight was a necessary, albeit unpleasant, wake-up call. True leadership wasn't control, it was ensuring a safe harbor. This story shows how heavy silence can sometimes be, but also what a single voice or stance can change. Against what injustice does the Clara inside you want to raise her voice? Or have you been the Keanu offering support to someone in a difficult situation? Let's inspire each other by sharing moments of courage and support in the comments.